Scammers are everywhere in modern times, and their fraudulent activities can be highly inconvenient for most of us. Every day, we receive a barrage of calls, texts, and emails from people pretending to be someone they're not. They trick us into falling for their trap by sending us fake bank account alerts or notifications about a delayed item we didn't order. Scammers have a variety of techniques for taking advantage of people, some of which can be pretty clever. Financial hardship can arise from falling for a scam, but more intricate schemes can have disastrous effects. When Albanians went through one of the most devastating financial crises in modern history 26 years ago, that was the situation. Pyramid schemes that guaranteed great rates of return on investments were to blame for this collapse. Numerous Albanians lost their entire life savings due to the failure of investment schemes, which sparked resentment, civil unrest, and ultimately thousands of deaths. This terrible occurrence serves as a sobering warning about the risks of Ponzi schemes and the effects they can have on a country. In this video, we'll examine the reasons for this catastrophe and the insightful lessons that may be drawn from it. Pyramid scams that swept the country in the late 1990s contributed to the economic collapse of Albania. It's crucial first to comprehend the general mode of operation of such plans to fully grasp how such schemes can bring a whole nation to its knees. Pyramid schemes are illegal investment schemes that entice investors with the promise of large profits, only to cause them to suffer sizable financial losses. Typically, a small business or one person will market a good or service and promise high returns on investment. Pyramid schemes frequently promise poor or non-existent goods or services in reality. These scams form a pyramid by recruiting new investors to pay off prior investors. The method first seems successful since new investors receive returns from money gathered from later members rather than from the service's revenues. But as the scheme expands, it gets harder and harder to repay every investor. The system eventually reaches a breaking point and breaks apart, leaving those at the bottom with significant financial losses and no chance of getting their money back. Early investors that sold promptly, however, stand to make big profits. Sadly, pyramid schemes are widespread, and people become victims daily, losing varied financial stability, including entire life savings and even homes. But in this instance, a whole nation suffered, losing everything. Part 2. From Communism to Capitalism. Enver Hoxha became the dictator in Albania after World War II, bringing in a communist era that would remain for 4 decades. Hoxha oversaw a war-torn, utterly destroyed Albania racked by extreme poverty. He was a dictator who would use all means required to reconstruct the nation. Hoxha's government limited overseas travel, private property ownership, and religious practices in the early years of his rule. Clergy members, landowners, and peasants who disagreed with his reign were imprisoned, banished, or killed. Despite his authoritarian policies, some advancements were made in the nation. Albania experienced substantial advancements in transport and services due to increasing infrastructure investment, which aided the country's slow recovery and economic growth, industrialization, and urbanization. Nevertheless, despite these encouraging economic developments, Hoxha's authoritarian rule weighed heavily on the nation for many years. Enver Hoxha, the long-reigning dictator, died in 1985. By the late 1980s, the Albanian people had begun to voice their dissatisfaction with the communist, anti-religious state that had ruled over them for decades. In particular, students had started to take an active political role and fight against the oppressive system. Thankfully, Ramiz Alia, Hoxha's successor, was a more sensible leader. After extensive demonstrations and political campaigning, a revolution occurred, and Albania was on its way to electing a political party chosen by the people in 1989. Albania began transforming from a communist dictatorship to a capitalist nation in 1992, when the Democratic Party came to power. Albania's transformation to capitalism took some time. The new administration had to gradually implement economic reforms, including trade liberalization and state-owned firm privatization. The objective was to promote economic growth and draw in foreign investment. It wasn't easy, even if a little private sector was created. Having been isolated for many years, Albania needed more infrastructure and external investment, leading to a weak economy. The government also struggled with corruption and organized crime. However, a much more significant threat was looming. Part 3. Greed and Corruption. Early on in the development of democratic capitalism, Albania faced formidable obstacles. It was the poorest country in Europe, and its people were hungry to improve their economic standing following years of communist control. But because there were few banking and investment opportunities, there needed to be more oversight of the financial sector. This led to a situation where most of Albania's poor, uneducated and desperate citizens had minimal exposure to the capitalist market. Sadly, this made them simple pickings for investment pyramid schemes typical in the nation. In Albania, several businesses conducted pyramid schemes, the majority of which didn't have official registration and did so illegally. The mafia, unscrupulous foreign business people, and ex-communist officials all saw a chance to take advantage of the circumstance. These businesses enticed investors with claims of huge profits, up to 50% monthly at times. Such returns appeared too good to be true to the financially illiterate. Albanians who had never experienced capitalism thought this was how wealthy individuals invested in capitalist societies. Unfortunately, the government didn't end these schemes. Instead, it encouraged and supported them, increasing public appeal. It's understandable why Albanians became interested in pyramid schemes and quickly committed their life savings with promises of a 50% monthly return. 25 companies accounted for most of the creditors, with Vifa being the largest and boasting 60,000 investors who thought they could make far more than banks were willing to provide. Interestingly, Vifa was a legal business with a network of petrol stations and supermarkets, making them a well-known brand. The Ponzi scam, on the other hand, asserted that it had made investments in hotels, shops and factories, but this was utterly false because the profits never appeared. Researching the investing firms was complex because Albania's internet wasn't extensively used. Many Albanians sold their valuables, including their homes and farms, to participate in what they considered a secure and life-changing opportunity. By 1996, 10% of the country's GDP, or around $1.2 billion, had been invested in these schemes by an estimated two-thirds of the populace. Even though the average monthly income in the nation was only $80, this was the case. Unfortunately, the investors quickly learned that these schemes couldn't be sustained and that they could only generate returns by luring in new investors. These systems had reached their breaking points by the end of 1996. The collapse of Vifa, a significant player in the pyramid scheme industry, led to a wave of panic among investors, triggering a chain reaction among all the major firms. People rushed to withdraw their money, causing the other firms to collapse. This resulted in a widespread loss of investments, leaving many Albanians devastated and furious. The aftermath was marked by a period of social unrest. The country was plunged into chaos as many had sold off their possessions to invest in the schemes, only to lose everything with no hope of getting their money back. Part 4. Fallout. The fallout from the failure of the pyramid scams was terrible for Albania. Its citizens were left desiring justice or punishment, and its economy suffered significantly. Farmers, police officers and soldiers were among those who were scammed, which resulted in widespread poverty that was even worse than before. Albania had severe social instability, with riots and demonstrations occurring nationwide. Due to the collapse of the pyramid schemes, people from all walks of life, including farmers, police officials and soldiers, lost everything, and there was a great deal of hardship and resentment. The protests started peacefully, but in February 1997, the government used force to disperse the crowd, exacerbating the turmoil. The situation escalated into a civil war, prompting Prime Minister Alexander Maxi to resign on March 1, 1997, and President Sali Berisha to declare a state of emergency. A week later, the Socialist Party of Albania appointed a new Prime Minister, but the move did little to quell the people's anger. The government had lost control of the situation as it had exploded out of control. Armories were left unsecured and easily accessible to looting militias and criminal gangs because the police and National Guards had left their posts. With only 3.5 million people, 700,000 weapons were stolen. As a result, a sizable proportion. As citizens began to arm themselves, gunfire reverberated through the streets for months. Buildings belonging to the treasury were robbed and burned as the situation worsened and armed gangs appeared. Everyone was fighting for survival as the nation descended into turmoil. Eventually, the unrest erupted into a full-fledged uprising and a month-long civil war that killed 2,000 Albanians. The world rapidly learned about the unrest in Albania. On March 28, the United Nations Security Council deployed 7,000 troops to Albania to restore order and provide aid. In mid-April, neighboring countries sent a peacekeeping force to assist, and by late July, peace had returned. The United Nations and other organizations continued to provide humanitarian aid, and in 1998, a new government was formed through elections. Numerous difficulties faced the new administration, including widespread corruption and a severely damaged economy. Nevertheless, they strived to bring stability and order to the nation, laying the foundation for later democratic changes. Despite the challenges, Albania steadily regained its footing and life returned to normal. Albania's revolution was a turning point in its history, and the nation would continue to face difficult political and economic conditions for years. The Ponzi schemes that brought Albania to its knees in 1997 had a substantial and far-reaching effect. The nation's population has decreased due to inhabitants migrating to countries like Greece, Italy, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The crisis has left behind several ghost villages that have been abandoned, according to research by The Conversation. However, since 2020, there's been a trend of modest migration to Albania. Despite the difficulties Albania still faces, such as organized crime and corruption, there are signs of hope for the nation's future. The country has made tremendous political progress, including becoming a candidate for EU membership in 2009. Improvements to the economic environment and infrastructure have also been developed. However, the tragic results of the financial crisis and the civil war serve as a sobering reminder of our susceptibility to promises of prosperity. When thinking about any investment opportunity, it's imperative to exercise caution and attentiveness. We appreciate your participation in this enlightening investigation into how Ponzi scams ruined an entire nation. We hope this is a lesson learned and motivates you to be watchful in guarding your assets and personal information. Thank you for viewing, and remember to subscribe if you want more educational content.